startups don't succeed because nothing ever breaks. Like that's not how you succeed as a startup founder. In fact, everything will break all the time. And so your response to how things break, that's kind of what sets you apart. And culture is really the thing that kicks in when everything breaks.
What would happen if we just told the truth?
Welcome to TruthWorks, where we dig into the nitty-gritty of leadership and work.
And what needs to change? I'm Jessica Neal.
And I'm Patty McCord.
Our journey together started in HR, but trust us, it's evolved into something wild, honest, and well, a bit rebellious.
So throw out the handbook. We're here to redefine rules to work for us, not against us.
Let's dive into another episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Truth Works. I am Jessica Neal, your host, and I'm here with my co-host, Peter Clarke. Hi, Pete. How's it going?
Hey, going well?
Yeah. Are you excited about who we have today?
I am super excited. Yeah.
Do you want to introduce them?
Love these guys.
You want to introduce them since you introduced me to them?
Well, I could do that. Yeah. Then super excited to say we're here with Leif and Jannick from they're the founders of Excel Company Public. Well, I mean, we just say Excel. We just wrote them a check and they do all the hard work. So, but really exciting investment platform, AI native. We'll get into that. And I just love the way these guys think about building a company, how they think about culture, and excited to let them share the story and learn more from them. So,
yeah, me too. So welcome to the show, Leif and Jannick. How are you?
Thank you.
So
Great.
Pete is the reason why I know you two. And Pete introduced me to you, I don't know, how many years ago? No, I don't know.
That's a good question.
4 years ago?
Yeah, good question. Four,
five?
I mean, four.
Well, it
I
was
would say
2020.
Four, maybe.
2020.
Yeah, I think four.
Yeah.
In a few months, probably.
Yeah.
That sounds about right.
Well,
So,
I'll lead it. I like the story because the request was actually related to this podcast as well, in the sense that, Leif, I think you had specifically said, hey, is it possible to get connected to Patty? And, I want to talk about the Netflix culture deck. I'd love to learn more about that. And I think at that point I said, well, probably yes, but then the person you should probably really talk to, who was a part of building that, but then also had to live with it for quite a lot of time afterwards, was Jessica. So you should probably talk to her and get the real scoop on the implementation of what that was. And I think I'd always love the fact, Jessica, that you would point out that the title of that deck was the Netflix culture deck, not the Company X culture deck. Insert your own company name.
right.
Use what you want to kind of take the best of it and fit it into your organization. So
Yeah.
I think that was the premise behind the intro. And then all of a sudden, Jessica's on the board. So
Yeah. When Jannick and I started, we actually sent Patty's book back and forth to us. That was like in the very, very early days and so on. And I think generally speaking, we just have, we're still Europeans, right? And whatnot. And so we have maybe we're like sometimes more direct than maybe some Americans, to be quite frank, even though I'm also American now, by the way. But,
congrats.
But we always very much appreciated this focus on performance culture in that, and the way it was just laid out, obviously in the Netflix culture deck, but then also like in Patty's book and whatnot. And that's exactly why, Pete and I kind of talked about the stuff. Mm-hmm. And so like we always say it's very cool serendipitous that like when we started and we're nothing and whatnot, we were like talking about something in this book, etc. Then Excel came in, then obviously we meet Pete, etc. And then suddenly like being on the board is it's kind of like an awesome,
it's a very full circle.
Well,
it's kind of like an awesome full circle.
It's been awesome to be on your board, and I'm so excited about what we're doing as a company and an organization. I think you two are really exceptional at navigating a lot of stuff together, which we're gonna talk about, because you guys have navigated some really tough things along the road, but you've done it with grace and thoughtfulness, and you two just are a really good team. And I want to unpack why that is. But before we get into all of that, I want to introduce the listeners to what Public is. We just had a big, huge launch that's gone very well. I want you to tell them about that, but tell them about Public and tell them about what we're doing these days.
Yeah, so Public is what we call the Agentic brokerage. And so it is the easiest, safest way to put AI agents to work directly inside your portfolio. And so that means that you can instruct agents to basically help you with all facets of your investing account, from monitoring markets to moving money around, and even to executing trades across a broad range of asset classes that we support: equities, fractional treasuries, fractional corporate bonds, crypto options, and more to come. Over the years, we've added more account types as well. So started with a brokerage account, then we added retirement accounts. Now we added crypto retirement accounts very recently, which has been really fun. And are currently also launching entity accounts, so things like corporate accounts, even trust accounts, if you have money in trusts. And so we thought a lot about the sort of macro opportunity of the great wealth transfer over the years and what it really takes to capture that. And when we looked at sort of consumer fintech 1.0, call it, we saw that it was heavily shaped by finance going mobile. Therefore, everything became like a game, gamified trading, $100 payday advances, and that lent itself very well to sort of down market TAM expansion. But in America, it's a very K-shaped economy. And so actually 85% of the wealth transfer will go to the top 25% of the digital generation, if you will. And nobody was really, we thought, building that product. And so that's basically, with a few sort of turns along the road, because to your point, Jessica, there has been some moments. We'll get into those, but I always say we're a 6.5-year-old company that have seen every market cycle twice already. Given the fact that we launched in late 2019.
Yeah.
But the way you can think about the story is we've built, with first to do fractional share trading, by the way, built sort of a fully fractional multi-asset trading system, multi-account type. And then starting in early 2023, added this agentic AI layer across everything to help you with research and now even trade execution.
Yeah. And it is so cool. Like, I don't know. It's what we've built. I'm just proud. I'm a proud board member. I'm proud of you guys.
I mean, look, I think everyone
really
on the team,
cool.
one on the team feels that, you're only similar to the saying that you're only as good as your last album, whatever. Isn't that like a thing rappers say or something?
Yeah.
But it's like every big sort of product that we've worked on every year has been so much more fun than the last two.
Mm-hmm.
And so much more mind-blowing, right? And I think this really has been a build where we're all like, I mean, arguably there's nothing bigger you can execute on as a technology company than a fundamental technology shift, right?
Right.
And so in our space, the way it's broken down in the past is like you used to call your broker back in the 80s and trade on the phone, not actually on an app, but like on the horn.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then with the internet, you had sort of the dawn of the discount broker, right? Trading moved online. Then with the smartphone, you had this like neo broker concept, the mobile broker. And now in the era of AI, it's sort of the agentic brokerage model that we think will play a huge part of that future. And we are, to some degree, I also think proud to be the first to push the industry into that direction. And so, yeah, it's been very fun to work on, a lot of joy, a lot of pride in the team right now. And I think everybody's firing on all cylinders.
Yeah. And what I don't know, what I love about it is just, it's frictionless kind of, because you can train it and set it up the way that you want. Like, like when you give the example of like hedging and all the things, it's like, you don't have to make that phone call and go through all the rigmarole of calling the broker and da. You can just say, help me understand this. And the data and the insights that you get are just so good. What do you use it? What are you excited to use it for? Like,
so one thing that I use it for a lot myself is this thing called generating income with selling options, specifically selling covered calls.
Okay.
And it's one of these things where like, okay, if you own Amazon, Netflix, whatever, you sell instead of buy covered, you sell covered calls, it's called, so that you basically almost like market making from the other side. And you can make a lot of money on that in like income. Like I make $10,000, $20,000 a month doing that in a pretty low risk way. But man, that's always been the most daunting thing, because if you're doing it manually, you gotta analyze risk. You gotta read the options chain. You gotta understand this thing called the Greeks. I don't know if any of you speak Greek, but the Greeks, for people that are not doing this every day, can also be sort of hard to navigate. And so with agents, that just gets reduced to a prompt of every day, scan my portfolio for opportunities, to risk opportunities, to generate another 5K of income selling covered calls that go a month out, 6 months out, whatever the case is. And you put that on autopilot. You literally just like go back and forth a conversation. 3, 4, 5, 6 messages, you activate it, and then it just runs on your account. And you can either have it run automatically and place the trades automatically, or if you're not fully there yet, you just set it up as like a monitoring agent that sends you a message like, hey, now you can sell these low risk covered calls on Amazon. Do you want to do that? You click a button, and then it does it that way. And so I think we really are very excited about taking this entire generation that sort of learned to trade on the phone, let's say with various degrees of risk, maybe not always defaulting to the most risk reward optimized kind of trades, because you get excited about, GameStop in 2021 or some coins here and there. But I think we do actually really believe, if you zoom out, we've collectively as an industry spent the last 10 years democratizing access.
Yeah.
But you don't have the same set of resources, right? So you have the same access now. You can trade at the same cost as Goldman Sachs now, right?
Yeah.
Zero, like the cost actually doesn't go much below zero. And then I keep reminding people that we offer rebates on options trading now. So if there are any options traders out there in the audience, go check that out. But but basically, it's all been about access. These next 10 years with AI are going to be about resources and really resourcing retail investors, individual investors, to the same extent that institutionals are. And I say the next 10 years, but the truth is we're pretty much there already. There's maybe some stuff around the corners, but like give it another year or two, and I think we'll be fully there.
What's interesting in Jannick's covered call example is it's a good example of something where a lot of people have heard of the high level concept of generating income through covered calls, but they really lack the knowledge and ability to execute on that.
Mm-hmm.
And where suddenly AI and the automation of these agents can really help people to actually bridge that gap and put these into place without having to go now and read a book and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And so what agents really do, then they move everyone up in their own sophistication. And that, I think, is something that's really, really powerful, which is then also then suddenly something that starts to really eat away on the business of financial advisors and so on, because people will be more able to do these things themselves, and will have more confidence in their own actions as an investor as well.
It's exciting. So people go look at Public and get the app and sign up, because it really is quite tremendous. Especially you option traders, go check it out. Okay.
Reiterate
Jessica
that.
only says that because she knows the margins on options trading. That's why.
I do.
Well,
It's a good product. Yes. What are you going to say, Pete?
Just the democratization of access, right? I think, folks that dabble in investing, you hear about all of these things, but the barriers, right, to actually go and attempt that are, seem significantly high based on the traditional platforms.
Mm-hmm.
But just being able to then sort of somewhat confidently say, oh yeah, I can do options trading, right? Or I can, take advantage of the money I know that's being made. But just when you think about what technology has brought to trading, it's just so cool that sort of Public unlocks that for the average person and, enables them to participate.
I also think what we've seen already is like it changes how people think about concepts like trading strategies. Like just the word sounds like very sophisticated, like high frequency, whatever. And it's like, sure, but in the same way that you can now build a website being a complete non-technical person, you can now set up a trading strategy being a complete non-quantitative trader type, hedge fund, whatever person. And so really trading strategies can be as simple as every time NVIDIA dips 3% in a week, add to my position. Or every time it touches down to a 25 forward PE ratio, add another 10 grand. And so it's I think it helps. Like people have these unstructured strategies actually in their minds. They don't give themselves often enough credit of how they're actually able to kind of have some good ideas. But to Leif's point, it's the execution on that. Because if you're not glued in front of the screen 24/7, how are you gonna just put in the order at the point in time where the 25 PE becomes a thing, or it drops, or the volatility does this? And so if you can just like hand it off to agents, like it changes the whole trading experience from like buy 200 shares of Apple here and there to you're just instructing agents. You're just expressing intent. If valuations compress another 15% from here, add another 20% to my portfolio across the board. It like changes just how you do all that stuff. And that's why we really think it is a user interface shift by definition.
Yeah. Because I mean, you miss it. If you miss it, you miss it.
Exactly. And you don't know it's coming back. Like that's the thing.
That opportunity is gone.
Exactly.
Which is especially also something as market hours expand, right? Crypto is already 24/7.
Yeah.
The stock market is like, most cases like 24/5. We're going to be there soon as well. That's going to be 24/7 at some point as well. And so like, it's going to be really this thing where the market is always on. And, so yeah.
Yeah. That's actually interesting because somebody was telling me the other day, last year I moved into like a new office. And somebody was telling me, having this perspective on it of like, well, it's just what sucks about your office, like people only use it a third of the time. And I'm like, no, like we're in the office like pretty much all days. It's like, yeah, but you're still going home to sleep. Agents don't do that, right? And so, we were talking about like people and how many people you need to build a company and productivity and such.
Yeah.
But the same is true for investing in your portfolio, right? You basically like once crypto's over 24/7 to Leif's points, stocks will be there soon. And then it's a question of like, are you going to be glued to the screen? Even if you're a day trader, even if it's your full-time job, are you going to be glued to the screen 24/7?
Yeah, you got to sleep.
No, you're not.
Yeah, you got to sleep.
Eventually, you got to get your Ariana Huffington 6, 7, 8 hours, how much you need. And so, yeah. There you go.
Well, let's shift from the launch and how great the product is and talk about the culture and how you guys have thought about that and what, I think early on you both decided that it was part of the strategy, which hints, why I met you and eventually got on the board. But what were your thoughts, when you were sort of coming into this of the type of company you wanted to create?
I mean, first, the way the company was started, that it was basically the first, 30 people or something, was essentially a mix of people that Jannick used to work with for many years in his old company.
Yep.
And people that I used to work with for many years in my old company, right? So we both sold companies before, and then we kind of brought our own teams back together. And so it was a very tight-knit group from the start and a very kind of high trust group from the start. In that, you're obviously able to just like work already like quite fast, and you kind of know what your like what everyone kind of believes and so on. So like the company, so to say, is already kind of founded quite homogenous from like a cultural perspective, because everyone kind of came together with like, very similar, same backgrounds. Yeah, from two different teams, but like,
yeah,
I would say
similarities. You had the same values.
Yeah,
exactly.
Values, exactly.
Yeah.
And so like as we then started, like one of the very first things we did was actually write down principles. And so write down just like, so what are the high level things that we kind of want this organization to work. And we always looked at it as something where it's like, number one, they're aspirational. If everyone that we would hire in the future would already work like that, we wouldn't need to write them down. And so these are the things that are just like reminders. But then number two, structuring them in a way where they are much more tools for people they can use in their day to day versus like motivational posters that hang in the office. Because I think whenever you talk company principles, it's very easy for people to just roll their eyes at it. And when we do these onboarding sessions, when we run people through the principles, we literally say that out loud to people. We're like, we understand there's people in this room right now that likely will roll their eyes secretly right now when we go through these things, but think about them as tools you use in your day to day. And a good example of that is principle one is honesty equals bullshit. And that comes a little bit from because the team that started, big European influence, maybe a little bit more candor there than you sometimes have in America, to be frank. And we realized that a lot of people, for example, especially when they're new, they really struggle actually with candor. And we look at, for example, honesty is also something that is a tool for efficiency, because you know exactly where people stand. The communication is very straight and direct. There's no interpretation needed, you know, and so on. And so like it is a pure efficiency tool, but it's also a tool to build relationships really quickly, for example, right? Like I will trust you more when I learn very quickly that you're always honest to me, and I don't have to read, that I don't have to interpret what you might think or what you really think or so on, you know? But we knew that was like a very uncomfortable thing. And so therefore principle one, honesty kills bullshit, became like one of these principles where it's like a tool. And then in the company, we have people that within meetings and stuff, or when they give other people feedback, they say out loud, hey, principle one, in order to set themselves up as like, I'm lifting this card up right now, like this license that the company gave me to act a certain way. I'm not trying to be a dick right now. I'm trying to work the way the company wants us to work, you know? And I'm going to raise this card, which also puts you into a position where you're now maybe a little bit more open to receive this like candor, you know, because it's like this little flag at you before you bring that up, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And that has been, for example, like a tool now that people use across the org. But also it helps because they use it towards us as well, right? So people will send us a Slack message and be like, hey, principle one, do. And so it makes them also feel more comfortable to give us candid feedback, you know, et cetera. And so like, those were the things that we talked about, that we kind of thought about, like where we had this like type-knit group that already worked a certain way. And then we tried to, you know, kind of, you know, figure out like how we bring that into words, but then bring it into tools so we can onboard people into the way all these people already are working.
Well, and I think it's important what you're saying. And I think a lot of people misunderstand what culture really is. And of course, it's value based, right? And that's where you guys started, but it's your operating model, right? It's how people make decisions. It's how, you know, you get alignment. It's how you give feedback. It's how you know who to hire and who to fire. It's how you know how fast to move and how not fast to move, right? It's all the things. And I think, you know, when you can get, you know, very clear on what your values are, but then build the system, the product of working, which is what you guys have done with these tools, right? That's operational excellence flows through the company.
No, totally. I think that's obviously exactly how we're thinking about it. Like culture is the operating model, the operating system, and then principles are the operating tools, which means you should be able to use them in a decision.
Right.
Yeah. To last point, it might feel a little bit awkward at first when people join, that people are in Slack like P1, P3, P4, colon, literally, but like that's how it works. And so, and I think once people get used to it, they're like, this is very efficient. This is also a way that people don't take things personal as much. Which I think
because
is
it's not about them. It's about the principle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the other thing I'll add to it is there are these 10 principles. We've open sourced them, so anyone can go and take a look at them. They're on our website, but they also work in tandem, right? So principle 1 is honesty kills bullshit. Principle 2 is feedback comes from a place of care. And so those two, for example, work very much in tandem because it's a little bit the balance of like, okay, we also have a very clear definition of feedback, by the way. Feedback doesn't equal criticism. Feedback is constructive suggestions for improvement. And so I think being very clear on all those things makes it work and having them help balance each other out. And I think that's taken us a couple, by the way, they are version too. So they're not on GitHub, but they could be like we see no reason why you need to write these things once and then not have sort of a version log history, because nobody gets anything right in this life for the first time. And so there's been multiple versions and although they don't change as much as they used to at this very moment, you know, we are still open to the idea of kind of changing them as time passes.
Well, because it does change. And, you know, the company you are now is not the company you were a year ago. And it's not going to be the company we are a year from now. And, you know, how you're operating at all of those stages changes. And so you have to be evolutionary on the culture versus, I think a lot of people are like, let's maintain, let's preserve. And it's like, well, no, we're not making jam.
Right.
It's just like, we don't want to preserve it,
Since 1957.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. We want to make it better and better and better and better.
Yeah. But it is because like the principles are they come top down from straight up company targets.
Yeah.
Right. So like, it's easy to look at this stuff as like these fluffy concepts and so on, but super straightforward. These are capitalistic tools for us to be a more performant company that grows faster and generates more revenues. Like that is really what they're for at the end of the day. And therefore, it's like as the company evolves and our goals as a company change, then these updates to the principles is essentially one of the ways of how we, try to help align the organization towards those outcomes. Right? And so one big thing for us is, for example, is that, product velocity is the leading indicator for growth for us. Whenever we launch new features and new products, like that, flows through, all numbers that we have. Every cohort looks better than the last and stuff. And that comes from us having a very high product velocity. So now, therefore it's very tied to growth for us to have a high product velocity. Therefore, what are the principles that fit into high product velocity? And for example, we have one principle, which is literally move fast through organized speeding. And so just the concept of organized speeding, where it's like, while you create work, make sure the documentation is being created in tandem. You shouldn't sit down and have to write documentation for a week now because you've done something, etc. And so this concept of like organized speeding, it directly kind of fits into the sense of how are we able to run quickly as an org, because we're doing organized speeding, and this is how you execute an organized speeding and that kind of, principle around that. And again, it's a tool you're using it day to day. You can tell someone else like, hey, this is not really organized speeding, what you're doing,
Right.
But it comes from the top down of just, we're running a business here and there's targets we want to hit. And these are basically ways for us to then,
right. This is how we're going to do it. Yeah.
The other thing is like,
wait, Pete wants the question. Let him know.
No, I just want to pause and reinforce, while most people might take away, Jannick, that you make $20,000 a month trading options. But back to, what has been described here that I couldn't reinforce more is just, what we are listening to is a great definition of first principle systems thinking around organizational design and construction, right? Which is, people ask about it and very few people do it. But just back to what you said, Leif, at the beginning, write it down. People do roll their eyes, right? Which is unfortunate because it's like, if it's not documented, if it's not sort of top down, well articulated, right? Everyone has questions around where we're going as an organization. And then tying all of these things back again to what you just did, like these things all translate down to how do we execute as a business? And, there's so many founders often that ask the question, like, well, how do we, think about the organization? And it's like this.
Like this,
do these things.
Right.
Like,
but they don't do them.
No. When this just popped up was like, there's this quote from the day,
Sorry.
So the last thing I'll leave is like this, now let me drag out old Dr. Deming quote of like, every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. Right. And it's like, it's coming back up again, but I like that.
Yeah, but it's true.
Anyway.
But like to the rolling eyes thing, and you don't always see people rolling eyes, right? But it happens all the time. There's always someone who will be cynical about things. And I think cynicism is generally a very dangerous thing. But where the pure fact of addressing it directly and saying it out loud basically disarms it. And it's the same way, like when you talk to someone like in the team or whatever, and you kind of feel that they're upset, but they're not saying it or whatever, and you saying out loud of like, you seem upset, but like, I think it's something very powerful, and it kind of fits into the principle of honesty because bullshit of like being an org that just culturally is very vocal and doesn't let things stand in the room, but says these things out loud and tries to, as things are being discovered, even if they might turn out to be wrong, to be vocal about it. Because it helps disarm these things, and it helps people to also sometimes get the self-awareness to recognize of like, oh, maybe I was a little bit too cynical here. And so on. Because I think this is very important.
I think the eye rolling really stems from people being in other companies and they're going through their values and they're like, here we go. Here,
integrity.
Then,
Honesty.
right. Transparency, and then, they don't see any of that in action. Right.
No doubt.
And so, I think that the other thing that you two have done quite well that I think is harder for other organizations is you live it. So, yes, you're going through the principles with people and you're explaining them to them, and maybe they're doing the eye rolling and maybe they're walking away with less eye rolling from that presentation. But then after that, they see it in action, right?
Absolutely.
And that's what everybody is waiting for, whether they've been there for a long time or whether they're new. They're looking around, waiting for you to do the opposite of what you said you were going to do. They're waiting to see the hypocrisy, and they're like, I told you, you said we were feedback, but we are not feedback. You don't give any feedback ever, right? Oh, you said we hired high performers, but you have that bozo who's a total jerk over there. So, that's what they're waiting for. And then that also builds the cynicism, right? Because
Totally.
they're just waiting for that. So you guys actually do a very good job of not just being clear on what it is, but then actually living what it is.
I think you're right, Peter. It's really too bad that culture has this brand almost where many people kind of roll their eyes, right? Because, and I think it stems from the fact that it has meant so many different things over the years. Back in 2021, a lot of people thought that it meant foosball tables or ping pong tables in the lobby kind of thing. But I think for startups, it is especially so important, right? Because startups don't succeed because nothing ever breaks. That's not how you succeed as a startup founder. In fact, everything will break all the time. And so your response to how things break, that's kind of what sets you apart. And culture is really the thing that kicks in when everything breaks.
Mm-hmm.
And that end up having massive ramification. I'll give another anecdote. We've given this a couple of times in the past, but principle 10 is find a way. And 2 or 3 months before the whole GameStop scenario, one of our key engineers comes to us and be like, we got to refactor the core trading system. It can't scale much more than this. Maybe we can grow another 30% in users, but that's going to be it. Leif and I was like, okay, we'll look at it kind of next year. For reference, GameStop was in January, right? So it was like, let's get through the end of the year and Christmas, and then we'll take a look. And then at the end of January, this GameStop situation happens. All hell breaks loose, and we sign up just a ton of customers, double the user base in a week, and all that jazz. And in that moment, those guys found a way, and it was just principle 10 to the fullest of how to scale the trading system. And we were one of the few, if not the only one, to never really go down. And that actually ended up compounding into our brand to this day. We are known for our uptime. We are known for reliability. And so I just think it's such an awesome way that you can look over a 5-year arc of a principle, then going full on into action, really driving a small group of people to achieve something that I fundamentally don't think that they would have thought about it this way. They might have defaulted to sort of another decision if it wasn't just, okay, principle 10, find a way. Okay, we just got to find a way, meaning I don't care what it costs right now to scale these systems. And they did. And now it keeps compounding into the brand of the company to this day, which has, I think, become very much about uptime, reliability, kind of things that we're now known for. And so again, for anyone that says that culture is kind of just vibes or whatever, no, it drives direct business impact, equity value, and everything else.
Mm-hmm. It sure does. When you do it.
When you do it right.
Exactly.
When do it
There's
right.
that. The critical part.
I think the first thing is you got to do it at all. I think a lot of folks, for a lot of things, less about doing it well. There's a lot of people just don't really do it anymore, right? I feel like it's not something that people talk about as often as.
Yeah, but you have to put equal energy around how you work as you do your business strategy,
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But actually back to the sort of genesis of this relationship, and then, the Netflix culture deck was just that, that was a thing, people locked onto it as well to sort of say, okay, well, is this the playbook that I go run? And what I really appreciated about what you guys did was sort of we love the concept. And then of course you have to sort of customize, craft and change it to fit what you're doing. But if you can ultimately think about the foundation and the underlying principles and what you want to build on, that's how you get it done. But I think and I completely relate to the desire to sort of, pattern match, run the playbook, path of least resistance. But, I think the other challenge with a lot of what you guys have done is just, it's not easy, right? And you've got to stick to it and you've got to have conviction around it. Otherwise it does become the eye roll, right? Because
I agree. I think it's about using it as not as pattern matching, but as inspiration. Like if I could go back to Leif and mine's chat logs, which there's no chance because there's got to be like 1 billion text messages, but it takes way more than my wife or anyone else. But if I could, I think what I would find is we weren't sending each other like Netflix likes to play top of market. We should play top of market. Like at the time we had no funding, right? So it's like that would be silly. It was really just like, oh, this is how they're thinking about it. And this is kind of interesting. And it's like, and so it wasn't be like copy paste. It was like,
yeah,
this is an interesting notion. We should talk a little bit about this. And like, and by the way, we were like audio booking it at the same time, like sitting there for, which I can't believe nobody ever built the app to do that because it was highly efficient.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to, speaking of your texting each other, I want to talk a little bit about your relationship because you two are co-CEOs. And I think it's something that I talked to you guys about, becoming an advisor to the company and then becoming a board member is like, usually that's not the best model, right? The co-CEO thing. Oftentimes it fails. And in your two case, it seems to be working quite well. And in fact, I get a front seat to seeing how that actually works and plays out. But let's talk about that. Like, how's it going? How do you make it work? And
we're just really good actors. That's the
especially to a board member. Pretend.
Yeah, but I mean, like, first off, like pure operationally, we have our own direct reports. And so, we also have our own areas set in the company that we're very deep in, right? Like, Jannick's incredibly deep with the product design team, for example, like in Figma files and whatnot. I'm incredibly deep with the growth team and like, literally, writing podcasts. So there's places in the company where we're very, very deep. And then we have our own direct reports also from for example, all of engineering runs into Jannick, all the ops stuff kind of runs into me as well. But then we also have very strong leaders who like run their own teams and kind of like, are very, are like in the day-to-day very autonomous and so on. So I think it starts with number one, in the day-to-day, in like small decisions, you can't suddenly have two people needing to agree to everything at the same time. And you have to have real trust to each other in their domain, that they're going to make the right decisions, and so on. And I think also having the kind of understanding that even if I feel maybe a decision might be wrong, I'm not really agreeing or whatever, then to be very, then to have also the like trust and understanding of like, but I understand, but I know the decision-making framework that Jannick, for example, has, and I trust that. And therefore, I likely just have data points, or like I'm likely just kind of like missing context and data points that he has that makes him make the decision this way. And that is, and therefore I trust it, And I think it's even like whenever we have things that we like fight more over, for lack of better wording, right? Now we have ones where we shout at each other and
Yeah.
But what always happens is that once, like we always end up ending up at a point where we understand the other person's point of view and like the information they have, et cetera, and then we always actually end up making the same decision together. Maybe the decision changes slightly or whatever, but we're always ending up agreeing, which is quite interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just like kind of fight through that and so on. And then I think the other thing is just relationship-wise, like even when we fight like that, that might happen in like one chat app over here and then in another chat app over there. At the same time, we'll have a very calm conversation about something else. And so where it's very clearly just about that thing and it's not about the person or the ego thing behind it or whatever. And so you got to have that relationship as well, right? And then because there will be certain decisions still that are more on the like companies, high level strategy, fundraising, all these kinds of things
and
at more CEO level that we still are very much do together as well.
And by the way, those, and fun fact, Peter, I think the only guy who never really were to where they never even questioned it much was actually Samir, but Excel also had a version of co-CEOs kind of back in the day, right? Or partners at least. And we actually heard those guys on a podcast and they were like, well, it tend to get better judgment through more balanced decision making on the 1% of decisions that drive 90% of the outcome, meaning like the existential stuff.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, for the existential stuff, like you would want as many points of view as possible. You want to not make those sort of like in a bad mood or, just kind of quickly, like you want to noodle on those decisions. And then to Leif's point, all the other stuff, we just kind of trust each other. And so I think in short, I think it works because we're not doing the same job. We just have the same title. And there's a difference, right? And then I think when the job kind of overlaps, that's the stuff that, two heads are better than one. I think that's one point. The second point is, people sometimes ask us like how we can be so deep in our respective crafts still. And it is precisely because that we share the CEO duties.
Yeah.
Right. And so we can stay deeply embedded with the teams for a longer period of time. And I think you both have seen this many times where startups tend to get funded in staircases. And so the way they sometimes build out their leadership suite as well is a little staircasey, right? And so you've seen these examples where you grow the leadership team 300% in 6 months in one shot because you're the CEO and you got to do, if you're a B2B CEO, you got to travel around, you got to close some things and you install a CPO and a CMO and all this stuff at the same time. And the risk of getting those wrong, first of all, the cost of getting those hires wrong are really, really high.
Mm-hmm.
The risk of getting them wrong is higher the more you have hired at the same time. And so that's sort of where it's a little bit of a scale cheat code, I think, because we have been able to focus on one C-level exec at a time and install those, give them 6 to 12 months, get them really good, then do the next. And we're 2 people doing that, not just one.
Yeah.
And part of that is because like we don't have a chief product officer or a chief growth officer or whatever, because we stay and we can still cover a lot of ground and do those roles as we've scaled.
Yeah. And I think that, just watching you two and going back to when it is a little harder, maybe you're disagreeing. But I think the thing that you both have is you have enormous respect for the other person and as you mentioned, trust. But I mean, you guys truly respect each other and care for each other. And you also talk about the hard things. Like you're willing to go and talk about it and then come out the other end still friends, know?
Yeah, totally. I think disagreement is great.
Okay.
But disagreement is actually a feature, not a bug. Again, going back to like, if you never have a disagreement about anything, like you're probably not making the most calculated right decisions all the time, right?
Well, there's the podcast quote right there. That's the one.
Yeah, that's it.
That's the
quote.
cold open.
Jumping in quickly though, I think I can confuse correlation and causation and all of that, but like thinking back to the reason I think it also works goes back to what you were all describing at the beginning, which is we have a set of operating principles. Like you're working from a shared foundation, I think, which enables you to both focus on the areas that you're best at, knowing that, that obviously there's the trust from the length of your relationship, but again, also you're working from the same place as everybody else is. Because I'll use another co-CEO example of one, wasn't supposed to work, which is Atlassian. And, Scott and Mike it was always like, oh, you can't do co-CEO. And they're like, nah, seems like it's going okay. But what did they have? They had very well articulated set of principles, operating principles. They operated very much the same way. There was a lot of candor, and it was about the business and nothing personal. And so I don't think you can be a successful co-CEO without that. And whether or not that's the thing that makes it most successful, I couldn't say, but for sure, it would not work without it.
I think that's a prerequisite. It's sort of like you can have 2 CEOs, but only one operating system.
Yeah.
And that goes back to the principles, right? And if we were running totally different principles in the product team than in the growth team, like, this whole thing would have broken apart years ago.
It would have. Oh my gosh. Well, we're running out of time, unfortunately. I know. I could spend, hours. I do spend hours with you.
Part 2.
But I can spend more and more hours with you. And I'm going to get to see you in person in like a week. So that's going to be exciting.
That's not me though. Oh, well.
You're welcome, Peter.
You can come, Pete. You can come. Come to New York. Okay. I want to get one more question in, and then I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you to do something. One thing that I think both Pete and I share is a passion for hiring the best people you possibly can. What's the most important lesson you two have learned about hiring over the years? Yes, Leif, you're raising, for the listeners, Leif's raising his hand. Yes.
Stay away from the badge hunters. Don't be impressed by labels of great companies and whatnot. The amount of time we interviewed people or even hired one or two in the past and whatnot that had the typical like Stanford, and then I went to Facebook, and then I went to Stripe, and blah, 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 blah.
Oh, thank you.
And those badge hunters who essentially just made it like, who are in the mindset of making a career out of, career making versus doing fantastic work. And like they think more about how the LinkedIn looks like at the end of the day, like has been horrible. And I think the best hires we've made, I would say, likely 98% of our top performers, if you would look at their resume before public, you would likely recognize not a single company. You would likely, not be impressed by it, and so on. But what we've felt for ourselves is that finding people, like obviously. Finding number one, like this undiscovered talent, like I've put the wording, but also finding people that actually had to do the work. When we hired our, head of growth, for example, and we even talked to recruiters that helped us, etc. Like one of the briefing points was, don't find someone who was in like a great company that was like really greatly growing, like an Airbnb, like fantastic company, but the growth person there likely had very little input on actually the success of that company. That company would have been successful no matter what. No matter if it's that person or someone else is in there. Like they would likely been on the very same path. And so they've just been victim to a successful business and a company that already was kind of having some viral moment. And so we were like, okay, let's find someone who had to fight for their growth. Super competitive, industry, really like commodity product and whatnot, because that person learned something. Mm-hmm. They needed to do it themselves. Like they actually turned the dial and like tried something out and saw the results and actually learned from it and whatnot. And so like finding these people that had to like fight for their growth, in the growth role, very literal, but also in anything that applies to any other role, I think is something that we look very like that. In my experience, I know in our experience, like has been tremendous. And I think we see that in the vast majority of our top performers, that you look at their resumes and they come from places you might have never heard about. And that is something that we recognize is actually often more of a benefit than that.
Yeah.
I think that's a great one. Mine would be in the interview process, like be truth seeking to an uncomfortable degree. And this is not just a pun on the podcast name, I promise, but like really, really, it is unnatural to sit down with people that you don't know and ask them about their deepest and darkest fears.
Yep.
Like, why do you want to work for this company? Oh, because I really like the brand. Sure. Everyone's like, what is it? Like, let's get to the root of it. And sometimes you'll find things that it's like, I really want to impress my parents. Great. That's fine. By the way, there's no wrong answer. It's just important to understand coming in, like, what is your ultimate objective here? And then obviously because if you see great talent and you understand that, then you just gotta direct it in a way where it overlaps with the company's goals, and then everything becomes sort of downhill from there. And I think often, and it goes a little bit back to the badge hunters, and like I think there's a lot of people at times like, yeah, okay, you want to work for public, it's kind of a cool company, whatever. Like they want to add the badge. It's like that's not a good enough reason to come work here, right? And so I think really just being, just like maximum truth seeking in those first interviews, which I think is a little bit less obvious to folks. A lot of times people are like, oh, we can hire them, see how it goes. Like, no, you want to do that up front before anyone signs an agreement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one quick thing on that is just like, I love the truth seeking, and it's around motivation. Like, I think there's also a challenge sometimes for folks to be truth seeking in that, like, I'm walking into this sort of with this objective to somehow uncover the fact that you aren't who you say you are, or you didn't do the job you said you did. And it's like, well, that's fine. But like, if that's your going in position, it's more, again, I trust that you are good at the job. You're technically capable, right? If you're sitting here and we're talking about it, but I need to understand, again, what drives you and what motivates you and how you might be a fit here.
Yeah.
No, totally.
Oh.
It's actually building products sometimes have some similarities with that, because it's about like the implicit motivations, like these innate needs that people have that they might not even have perfectly crystallized for themselves yet. Because like you could very easily look at our product and be like, oh, it's just like everyone who joins just wants to like grow their money, right? It's like, sure, to some degree, but also sometimes people, it's like a personal thing they want to check off their, like it's a self-realization thing of like, I'm taking control of my own financial life more than I'm making 10% of the market this year.
Yeah. Well, I think you're covering something that's important, which is you're trying to get to the core of their passion and their motivation. When you hire somebody in the company, you want them to be drooling to solve the problems that you're solving. Like you want them to be really, and I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's on the product or whether it's in marketing, whatever that product is, they need to really want to do it. And when they really want to do it, it's not about them. It's about the problem. It's about the business. And that is what separates the badge hunter
Totally.
from, the person
100%.
that's really going to make an impact. Now, okay, we are totally out of time, and I know you two are very busy, okay, because you're running a company. So we'll make it quick. But the last thing we always ask our guests to do is to leave our listeners with something inspirational, something for them to go off and think about. So I would like each of you to gift them with a little something to inspire them.
I would say, to the degree that some of the listeners also might be aspiring entrepreneurs, if you could plot the amount of problems to be solved in the world, that curve is exponential. And I think that is a good thing, because I think as human beings, problem solving for so many of us is like one of the deepest kind of ways to connect to ourselves, to the world. It gives a sense of purpose. And so, a problem is sometimes a negatively loaded word, but I think the fact that we have so many problems in this world, choose to view that through a somewhat optimistic lens, maybe, of like problems are there to be solved. And the more problem you can solve, the more purpose you're going to lead your life with.
Yeah, I love that. That's a good one. What
I don't know how inspirational that is, but one principle that Jannick and I have between the two of us now, just also based off some, recent health scares and whatnot, is health first.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally used to be really heavy in this camp of where just like work ethic and the hours in and being the first in the office and the last out and whatnot was just like a sense of pride as well, right? And a sense of identity. With that, I know, for example, that I really neglected now. And now I've just made this decision, for example, that like, 3 times a week in the morning, I'm in the gym, I'm a trainer, like I do this, I've been doing this now for maybe 2 years. And that has been such an improvement to my life, and has been such an improvement, I think, also to my focus and energy in the, when I'm working in the office, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's 3 days a week now where I'm not the first in the office.
Yeah. And
it is completely okay. It's completely right and fine. And to be honest, it is likely even something that drove more performance than it took away. And
well,
as so like the other side, I can contribute massive net positive effect.
It's benefited everyone around you.
It's benefited everybody.
That is a good truth to end on, by the way.
Yes, if you're not taking care of yourself, you can't take care of anything else. So you got to take care of yourself first. Listen, you two are the best. I really appreciate you coming on the show. I know our listeners are going to love it. Keep doing what you're doing, and you're going to have to come back on in a year and tell us what else is happening.
Thanks. And I guess we officially have to say also just thanks, Pete, for the introduction. I don't know if we ever said that.
Exactly.
Thanks,
maybe
Pete.
Over drinks, drunken. That's one of the Excel weeks. But you were talking about causation earlier. And I was like, you don't have to go into it. You are the causation for all of us being here. So that
you
is...
are, Pete. Without you, this wouldn't have happened. Thank you, guys.
I love it. I appreciate it. I thought you were going to say we need to add a caveat about investment advice, based on your previous comments too.
Of course.
This is not
you just did that.
They don't give investment advice, okay? We don't do that.
We'll put it in the disclaimer in the description.
Yeah, we'll put that in the disclaimer.
Thanks for listening to Truth Works.